My name is Cynthia Daughtery. I'm 27, and if someone had told me a year ago that a single text message would flip my entire understanding of love inside out, I would have laughed. I wasn't the dramatic type. I wasn't the girl who spiraled when a man pulled away. If anything, I was the opposite. I'd spent years in relationships where I tried too hard, waited too long, forgave too easily. And somewhere along the way, quiet promises turned into quiet disappointments. So when my boyfriend at the time sent the message, I recognized the script before I even opened it. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I was at work, half listening to a coworker talk about weekend plans, when my phone buzzed. The preview alone told the whole story. I need a break, space to think. Please don't contact me for a while. A familiar ache opened in my chest, but it wasn't heartbreak, it was clarity. I'd seen this kind of message before. I'd watched friends crumble under it, watched people cling to space that was really just the soft launch of a breakup. The line between honesty and manipulation could be thin, but this was decisive. I stared at the text for a minute, maybe less. Then I typed, "Okay, take all the time you need. No long paragraphs, no begging, no anxious follow-ups. Just acceptance." It surprised even me, that calm. My coworker glanced over. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just got dumped." I said it casually, like I was talking about losing a pen. The truth was something inside me had gone quiet long before that text arrived. Something had dimmed after the third time he'd tested me with emotional distance, and the fifth time he'd weaponized silence during arguments. I hadn't called them tests back then, I'd called them rough patches. Funny how hindsight clears your vision. When I got home that evening, the apartment felt stale, heavy. His cologne clung to the sweater he'd left on the chair. His charger was still plugged in beside my bed. His toothbrush sat in the cup like it belonged there. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I just started packing. It took an hour. 1 box for toiletries, 1 for clothes, 1 for the random things he'd slowly migrated into my space. His favorite mug, his old hoodie, a pair of running shoes he never actually used. I stacked everything neatly by the door, taped the boxes shut, and felt the air lighten. If he wanted his things, he could retrieve them. If not, I had no strong opinion either way. Later that night, I called my closest friend. "You free this weekend?" "Probably." "Why? What's up?" "I'm newly single," I said, "and I need to get out." There was a pause. "Wait, what? What happened?" He wanted a break. I gave him one. For real. For real. 2 days later, Friday night rolled around. I didn't want anything fancy, so I went to a local bar near my place. Somewhere dim, familiar, uncomplicated. The universe, with its chaotic sense of humor, seated me beside someone I knew from college, Evan Blake. Tall, warm-eyed, the kind of man who had always felt easy to talk to. We'd gotten along back then, but timing never worked out. He'd had a girlfriend, I'd had a boyfriend. Life had its way of keeping people in the correct lanes until further notice. But that night, the lanes shifted. At first, we just talked light things, nostalgic things. He teased me about my old study habits. I told him his haircut was finally decent. We laughed more than I expected. By the end of the night, we exchanged numbers not with intent, but with familiarity, like picking up a conversation we'd paused years ago. On Saturday, we grabbed dinner. Sunday, coffee. Monday, a movie. Tuesday, he came over and met my dog, which was hilariously chaotic because my dog immediately decided Evan was his new best friend. Everything was natural. No games, no tests, no tension simmering under the surface. He was direct with his words, present in conversation, and his laughter reached his eyes. By Wednesday morning, exactly 4 days after the break text, he and I took a selfie together. It wasn't planned. My dog had knocked over a pillow. Evan laughed. I laughed at him laughing, and he snapped the photo. I looked genuinely happy. He did too. Evan posted it on his Instagram. Caption simple, best week ever. I didn't think twice about it. My relationship was over, or in my ex's words, on a break. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't cheating. I was just living. But I'd forgotten something crucial. People who set emotional traps often panic when someone steps around them instead of falling in. My phone started buzzing around 8 that night. I ignored the first 2 calls, unknown number. Then I saw his name. 15 missed calls, then 30, then 50. By midnight, 89 missed calls. Not exaggerating, I counted. Then the text poured in, hundreds of them. I checked the first few. "This was a test of your love. I can't believe you moved on so fast. You were supposed to fight for me. Who even is he? I was testing you, Cynthia." I actually laughed. A hollow, disbelieving laugh. A test. A relationship test disguised as a breakup. Was I supposed to chase someone who told me not to contact him? Something cold settled in my chest. Not sadness, not anger. Recognition. This wasn't new behavior. It was just the first time I refused to participate. I screenshotted everything. The calls, the texts, even the timestamps. A quiet instinct told me I'd need evidence later. Then I turned my phone on silent, slid it into a drawer, and went to bed. I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, my phone had effectively crashed under the weight of messages, voicemails, missed calls, texts from him, and from numbers I didn't recognize. I didn't listen. I didn't need to. I got dressed, went to work, and on my lunch break, I did one simple thing. Blocked his number. That afternoon, my Ring doorbell sent a notification. I checked the camera feed. He was standing at my doorstep, pacing, crying, checking his phone, running his hands through his hair like a man unraveling. My stomach tightened, but not out of pity. Out of certainty. The storm I sensed 4 days ago had finally arrived, and I was done playing weather control. When I pulled into my apartment parking lot that afternoon, I already knew he was there. The Ring notification had shown him pacing back and forth on the walkway, wiping under his eyes, like he was preparing a performance rather than expressing emotion. I parked, grabbed my bag, and walked toward the stairs with steady steps. The moment he spotted me, he inhaled sharply like relief and fury collided in his lungs. "We need to talk," he said, voice cracking just enough to sound rehearsed. I shook my head. "No, we don't." He stepped closer. "You can't just move on in 4 days." "You asked for a break," I said calmly. "You asked for space. I gave it to you." He blinked, stunned. "It was a test, Cynthia. A test to see if you loved me enough to fight for us." My jaw tightened, not because he said something shocking, but because he said something painfully predictable. "A test," I repeated. "Do you hear yourself?" You should have known, he snapped. Every girlfriend knows that when a guy says he needs space, he doesn't mean it literally. You were supposed to push back. Show me you cared. I let out a slow exhale. "No, that's not care. That's manipulation." His expression twisted. "So you just gave up, just like that?" "You ended the relationship," I said. "I simply respected your words." He stomped his foot, an actual stomp, like a child denied a toy. "I didn't think you'd actually move on." "Then maybe," I said softly, "you should have said what you meant." His face fell. Tears tried to form again. "Cynthia, please. I made a mistake. I love you. We can fix this." No. Just one word. Clean, final. Sharp enough to cut through months of confusion I used to swallow down. 2 years together and you're just done, he whispered. "You ended it," I reminded him. "I accepted it." He stared at me like I'd struck him. Then he tried a new tactic, guilt. "You didn't even try," he said. "Real love fights." Real love doesn't create problems just to test whether your partner reacts the way you want. That was the truth he couldn't handle, and the truth that pushed him over the edge. His voice rose, cracking like glass. "You're already seeing someone else. Are you serious? Are you trying to punish me?" I almost laughed. "You asked for space. I took you seriously. You don't get to rewrite the rules now." He opened his mouth again, but I'd already pulled out my phone. "I'm documenting this," I said quietly. "Please leave." His face froze. He took 2 shaky steps back. "You're a monster. And you're trespassing." He left in a huff of wounded pride and dramatic sighs, but I'd barely made it upstairs before my phone started buzzing again, this time with calls from an unknown number. I ignored them. I showered. I made dinner. I tried to reclaim the normalcy he'd cracked in half. But then my phone pinged with a voicemail from his mother. I sighed and pressed play. "Cynthia, sweetheart." She began in the tone older women use when they've decided a younger woman is at fault. "You need to forgive him. He made a mistake. You don't throw away a relationship because of one lapse in judgment." A lapse in judgment, a secret breakup as a test. I deleted the voicemail. Half an hour later, his friend messaged me a long paragraph about how men sometimes need ego reassurance and how I was immature for not reading between the lines. I replied with one sentence. "I respect actual communication, not mind games." He blocked me instantly. Good, less noise. The next day, things escalated. My close friends texted me screenshots from Facebook. My ex had posted a long, vague rant about modern women giving up too easily and being abandoned after one mistake. He didn't say my name, but he didn't have to. Our mutual friends flooded the comments with supportive emojis. Meanwhile, my real friends dropped into my DMs with messages like, "Girl, he's fishing for sympathy. Did he seriously turn a breakup test into a moral lecture? Do we need to gather?" I appreciated the chaos sisters rallying behind me, but I didn't want a war. I wanted quiet. But quiet wasn't in his vocabulary. That afternoon, he added himself to a group chat I shared with college friends. Added Tyler X. Can you guys talk sense into her? She's ruining everything. She moved on instantly. The messages filled the chat like smoke. Half the group defended me. The other half told me I should at least hear him out. I left the group and made a new one without them. The truth cost me 3 friendships that day. A fair trade. Later that night, Evan called. You okay? He asked. Just tired, I admitted. He's on a full-blown campaign. Against you. Against my peace, I thought. Against my refusal to play his game. He's texting people I haven't spoken to in years, I said. Posting online. Showing up places. It's a lot. You want me to back off? Evan asked gently. I closed my eyes. His tone wasn't insecure or offended. It was protective, respectful. A question, not an assumption. Absolutely not, I said. That's exactly what he wants. Good, Evan said. Because I'm not going anywhere. His words warmed something inside me that had been cold for a long time. By the weekend, my ex's behavior took on a new flavor: desperation. He posted old couple photos of us with captions like, when she actually loved me and before she gave up. He messaged my sister claiming I'd cheated. She called me immediately. What's wrong with him? She said. He told me you blindsided him. He told me he needed space, I replied. I respected it. My sister exhaled. Then that's all I need to know. You did nothing wrong. I felt myself soften. Support hits differently when your world is shaking. But the tipping point wasn't family, or friends, or social media. It happened 3 days later when my ex confronted Evan directly. Evan sent me a screenshot. Your girlfriend doesn't love you. She's just using you to hurt me. You're a rebound. You should walk away. Have some dignity. I read it twice. My chest tightened, not from fear, but from anger. This is unhinged, Evan texted beneath the screenshot. You okay? Yeah, I typed. I've dealt with worse. But thank you for telling me. Always, he wrote back. And somehow that steadiness meant more to me than anything else that week. My ex escalated again because men who rely on manipulation often don't stop when confronted. Fake accounts, anonymous warnings, mutual friends parroting his narrative. People I barely knew messaging me like they were experts in my relationship. He twisted everything, weaponized sympathy, played the scorned lover to perfection. I could feel the pressure tightening like a fist around my ribs. But even then, even through the exhaustion, one thought stayed clear in my mind. If this is how he behaves when I leave, imagine the future I avoided by refusing to stay. The storm wasn't ending, not yet. But I finally understood why I wasn't afraid. Because peace doesn't come from avoiding conflict. Peace comes from choosing yourself. The week after he showed up at my apartment was when everything truly shifted from annoying to alarming. Blocking his number hadn't slowed him down. Muting him on social media hadn't created distance. People who refuse to hear the word no don't just stop trying. They simply find new ways to force themselves into your life, and that's exactly what he started doing. The first incident happened at my gym. I had been going there for years, and it had always been one of the few places where my mind felt quiet. But the morning I walked through the parking lot and saw him leaning against a lamppost pretending to stretch, that quiet shattered. He perked up the second our eyes met, calling out my name with a desperate enthusiasm that made the hairs on my neck rise. I didn't break stride or offer him a response, but he hurried to keep up with me anyway. Inside, he trailed after me toward the treadmills, trying to talk, insisting on 5 minutes, insisting that I owed him some sort of intimate debrief, simply because he wanted it. I walked straight to the front desk and told the staff he had been harassing me. They didn't hesitate. Security approached him, spoke to him quietly, and escorted him out, but not before he looked back at me with a combination of betrayal and disbelief as if he were the injured party. That look bothered me more than his presence. Anger I could have handled. Rage would have made sense. But shock meant he still believed he had some inherent right to my time, my attention, my emotional energy. 2 days later, the same thing happened, at the coffee shop near my apartment. I walked in, saw him sitting in a corner pretending to type, and immediately walked back out. When he realized I was leaving, he followed me outside, quickly calling my name and begging me to please just listen. I ignored him, got into my car, and locked the doors. He slapped his hand against the window, not violently but forcefully enough to make the message clear he wasn't leaving. I reversed the car and drove off while his face collapsed into something between frustration and panic. When I returned home that afternoon, my building manager pulled me aside. She informed me that my ex had attempted to enter the building multiple times over the past few days. Residents had complained. Management had warned him more than once. She told me they had him on security footage and that they were preparing documentation in case the situation escalated further. I thanked her, but inside I felt a knotted pressure building. I wasn't afraid of him hurting me physically, but I was afraid of the relentlessness of the feeling that my world was shrinking because someone else refused to let me move on. Around the same time, the digital harassment escalated. Fake Instagram accounts with no posts, no followers, and generic usernames began messaging me. The messages alternated between insults and warnings about my new boyfriend claiming he had cheated on previous partners, or that I was embarrassing myself by being with someone so quickly. The writing style was unmistakably his overly dramatic punctuation, unnecessary capital letters, and emotional manipulation disguised as concern. Evan received his own batch of fake messages accusing me of cheating, accusing him of being a rebound, accusing both of us of ruining something perfect. He sent me screenshots with dry humor, telling me not to worry, but I could tell he was starting to understand the depth of what I was dealing with. Then his extended family got involved. His cousin, a woman I had met twice, messaged me paragraphs about how he was not doing well and how he was falling apart. She asked if I could call him for 5 minutes because my voice would stabilize him. The implication was clear: if something happened to him, I would be responsible. People like to pretend that emotional blackmail is subtle, but it rarely is. I replied that if he was truly struggling, he needed professional help, not an ex-girlfriend he had manipulated. She called me heartless and blocked me. The worst part came when he showed up at Evan's workplace. Evan worked in a corporate office. Nowhere public-facing. Nowhere that a normal person could justify casually stopping by. But my ex went there anyway and attempted to talk his way past the receptionist, claiming he needed to speak to Evan man to man. When Evan told me about it, his voice was steady, but there was a tension underlying his calm that I hadn't heard before. Security escorted my ex out of the building, and he left complaining loudly about being treated like a criminal for trying to fix the situation like an adult. He later posted online about the incident, painting himself as a victim of a society that punishes men for fighting for love. His friends validated the delusion with comments about toxic women and modern immaturity. But the moment that genuinely unsettled me was a phone call from his father. The number was unfamiliar, and I answered without realizing who it was. His father's tone was sharp, impatient, and authoritative. He told me I needed to stop this, although he never clarified what this was. He accused me of abandoning his son, insisted that my ex was depressed, and asked whether I could live with myself if something happened to him. The accusation was disgusting in its implication. It was an attempt to transfer responsibility for an adult man's emotional state onto a woman he had manipulated and discarded. I responded as calmly as I could, saying that if his son was in crisis, he needed a therapist, not an ex-partner who had set clear boundaries. He hung up on me without another word. When I told Evan about the call, he didn't try to sweep it away or tell me I was overreacting. He didn't become defensive or insecure. He simply listened, then said we needed to document it along with everything else. At this point, our folder of evidence had grown enormous: screenshots, timestamps, messages, call logs, building reports, gym security notes. It felt surreal to compile what essentially amounted to a case file against someone I had once planned a future with. The next morning, the building manager delivered a notice to my door. An unauthorized individual had been repeatedly attempting access to the property. A trespassing warning had been formally issued. A photograph from the security footage was attached to my ex wearing a hoodie and cap, loitering near the back entrance with the expression of someone waiting for a door to magically open. Seeing the picture made something inside me settle, not fear, but clarity. The situation was no longer emotional. It was factual. It was documented. It was legally recognized. Interestingly, around this time, mutual friends who had sided with him at the beginning began switching positions. They reached out separately, apologizing for believing his claims that I had cheated or left him without warning. They told me that he had conveniently omitted the part where he had asked for a break. Some were embarrassed. Some were angry at him. Some admitted they had never liked how he handled conflict. I appreciated the apologies, but I didn't need them. I wasn't looking to reclaim anyone's approval. I was simply relieved that the truth had finally started to surface. Because that was when I realized something crucial. I wasn't afraid of losing people who preferred his narrative over reality. I wasn't afraid of being misunderstood anymore. His desperation wasn't proof of love. It was proof of entitlement. and his unraveling wasn't my responsibility, it was simply the natural consequence of a system of manipulation collapsing in on itself. The cracks in his mirror were beginning to spread, and with each one I felt a part of myself return that I didn't even know I'd lost. By the time the trespassing warning was issued, a strange calm began settling over me, like the eye of a hurricane had drifted directly above my life. Things weren't better, not even close, but the chaos had shifted into a pattern I could finally predict. And when something becomes predictable, it becomes manageable. What still surprised me, though, was how desperately he tried to keep the narrative tilted in his favor, even as it fell apart piece by piece. The first major crack happened online. He kept posting vague, melodramatic updates about heartbreak and betrayal, implying that I had left him without warning and replaced him instantly. He chose photos strategically. Old couple shots from vacations carefully cropped, selfies, pictures with captions like, "Before it all fell apart," or "When she still cared." He wanted an audience, and for a time he had one. His friends commented with sympathy. Strangers offered generic encouragement. Some mutual acquaintances posted supportive emojis without asking for context. And for a few days I let him have his pity stage. I figured he'd burn through it eventually. But then he posted a caption claiming he had no idea what went wrong and that he woke up one day abandoned. That was when the messages started coming in, not from the people who already knew the truth, but from the ones who had believed him and were now confused. 3 mutual friends reached out separately. One said, "He told us you cheated." Another said, "He claimed you blocked him out of nowhere." The third said, "He left out the part where he asked for a break." I didn't lash out or try to shame anyone for believing him. They had only heard one side. So I sent each of them the screenshots, the break text, the follow-up messages, the timestamps, the social media posts, the harassment logs. Each friend responded the same way, a pause followed by some variation of "Jesus Christ, I'm so sorry. He completely lied to us, or I had no idea he was like this." Their apologies weren't what mattered. What mattered was watching his carefully constructed version of events begin to fracture as more and more people saw behind the curtain. And once the curtain moved even an inch, the truth poured through like sunlight. Those friends quietly distanced themselves from him. Some unfollowed him. Some confronted him. A couple even told him to stop using them as pawns in his personal meltdown. And though he didn't stop posting, the engagement dropped, and the comments shifted from sympathy to awkward silence. Meanwhile, my own life, though still impacted by his chaos, was beginning to stabilize. Evan and I grew closer, not with grand declarations or dramatic moments, but in small, steady ways that felt grounding. He started showing up with my favorite tea when I'd had a stressful day. He walked with me to my car at night without making it feel like pity. He listened without offering unsolicited advice. One evening he said, "I know this is still heavy, but you're handling it with so much strength. I hadn't felt strong, but hearing it made me want to be." Meeting Evan's parents was another unexpected turning point. His mother greeted me with warm curiosity, and his father with a firm handshake that carried no judgment. Over dinner, his dad asked about my ex, not in a prying way, but in a practical one. "Our daughter mentioned you've been dealing with some complications." "Everything under control," he asked, not as a challenge, but as concern for his son's safety and mine. I explained everything briefly: the break, the test, the harassment, the stalking attempts, the trespassing warning. Evan's dad leaned back, shook his head, and said, "Life is too short for games like that. You were smart to walk away. It wasn't approval I had sought, but it felt like validation from a grounded, level-headed adult who saw the situation clearly." Evan's mother chimed in softly. "I'm glad you two met. You seem good for each other." Their acceptance added a sense of normalcy I hadn't realized I needed. But while my world was healing, my ex was doubling down. And his next strategy was to attack my professional life. Somehow he figured out where I worked, not difficult considering LinkedIn exists, and began calling my office pretending to be a family member with an emergency. The first-time reception transferred the call to me without hesitation. His voice came through frantic and pleading, demanding that I talk to him. I ended the call abruptly and reported it to HR. 2 days later, he called again, claiming to be my sister. Thankfully, reception had been warned and verified with me before transferring anything. When I confirmed the deception, they blocked his number and flagged the incident. HR documented everything. The building's legal department gave me resources. I appreciated their professionalism, but a part of me felt nauseous knowing he was willing to cross into my career, my last untouched space. He also continued trying to influence my family. My sister received a message claiming I had cheated. She immediately called me annoyed rather than concerned. "He's spiraling," she said. "He told me you betrayed him emotionally," whatever that means. I explained the situation again, and she responded, "I figured. Just checking. I'm on your side." Her consistency was reassuring. But the final crack in his narrative, the one he couldn't plaster over, came when a mutual friend who hadn't spoken to either of us much reached out asking for the truth. When I sent her the logs, she said, "He's been telling everyone you ghosted him during a mental health crisis." That was when I realized he wasn't just editing the story, he was rewriting the entire script to cast himself as a tragic hero and me as the villain. When she asked, "Can I share this with others?" "People deserve to know," I said yes. I didn't want revenge. I wanted honesty. And she shared it, quietly, privately, but thoroughly enough that the tide shifted. Friends who had once defended him stepped back. Others apologized. Some simply stopped commenting on his posts. Without an audience, his dramatic laments suddenly seemed theatrical rather than sympathetic. He continued posting sad quotes and vague comments about heartbreak, but fewer people engaged. Around this time, a handwritten letter arrived at my apartment. 5 pages, loopy handwriting, carefully chosen words. He apologized for everything, for the test, for the lies, for pushing me away out of fear. He said he was in therapy now that he understood the harm he caused, that he hoped one day I could forgive him. The letter ended with, "I know you've moved on, and I respect that, but I needed to let you know how sorry I am." I read it once, not with longing, not with anger, just with a distant kind of clarity. Then I placed it in the documentation folder with everything else. Evan asked later, "Are you going to respond?" I shook my head. "No," I said. "She doesn't deserve your energy," he replied and kissed my forehead. Even then, even with the apology letter, even with the silence that followed, I knew the story wasn't completely finished. Not yet. There was one last moment waiting, the moment all this was leading toward. And I didn't know whether it would feel like closure or simply the end of a very long chapter. 2 months passed after the handwritten apology letter arrived, and during that time, something inside me settled into a quiet I hadn't felt in years. Not silence quiet. Silence has an edge to it, like waiting for another shoe to drop. Quiet is different. Quiet is what happens when your nervous system finally believes you're safe again. The harassment tapered off after the police issued the trespassing warning, and although he still posted occasional sad quotes or nostalgic throwback pictures, they no longer carried weight. They were just static on a channel I'd stopped watching. My world shifted in ways that felt small at first, but ultimately profound. I moved in with Evan earlier than either of us would have predicted months before, but it didn't feel reckless. It felt natural. We communicated, we planned, we adjusted to each other's habits. There were no mind games, no tests disguised as boundaries, no contradictions to decipher. Evan said what he meant, and he meant what he said. That alone felt like luxury. We cooked together most nights. Sometimes we read in the same room without speaking. Sometimes we talked about the future in that tentative, curious way 2 people do when they're not making promises but acknowledging possibilities. Every once in a while, he'd ask if I was still okay, if anything from the past was lingering heavy. The answer slowly shifted from, "I'm getting there," to, "I think I finally am." Then the day of the accidental meeting arrived. I had gone to the coffee shop near my office, a place that had once felt tainted but had since regained a sense of normalcy. I walked inside, scanning the room out of habit more than fear, and there he was, my ex, sitting at a corner table, a half-empty cappuccino in front of him, staring at his phone. He looked up at the exact moment I saw him, and our eyes met with a kind of muted recognition. Not shock, not anger, just inevitability. For half a second, I considered leaving, but something inside me said no. Not out of defiance, but out of certainty. I'd spent so long being interrupted by him, disrupted by him, pulled into emotional labyrinths he built for me to get lost in. Walking out now would feel like performing fear I no longer felt. So I stayed. I approached the counter, calmly ordered my drink, and waited. He stood up and walked toward me, slower and quieter than I'd ever seen him move. "Cynthia," he said, almost whispering, Hi, I replied, neutral, civil. Up close, he looked different, tired, thinner, the kind of worn-down expression people get when they've been living inside their own consequences for too long. He swallowed hard. You look good, he said. I nodded politely. Thanks, you too. A long silence followed. Not tense, just empty. He glanced at the floor, then back up. I'm sorry for everything. I know, I said. I got your letter. You didn't respond. I didn't feel the need to. Another silence. He shifted his weight. Do you forgive me? He said it softly, but it wasn't a fragile question. It was a question expecting reassurance, expecting emotional labor I no longer offered. I held his gaze. I don't think about you enough to hold a grudge, I said. You made a choice when you asked for that break. I made a choice when I respected your words. We're both living with the results. He looked startled, like he had expected either warmth or hostility, but wasn't prepared for neutrality. Neutrality is powerful. It's the one reaction manipulators can't work with because there's nothing to push against. So you're over it, he asked. I was over it the day you made our relationship into a test. He winced, not dramatically, but enough that I could see the truth land. He nodded slowly. I didn't realize how badly I handled things until it was too late. Maybe I said, but that realization is yours to deal with, not mine. He looked like he wanted to say more, but there was nothing else for him to take from the moment except closure. And closure only has value when it's earned, not demanded. So he nodded one last time. I hope you're happy. I am, I said simply. I hope you heal. He walked out of the coffee shop with a slower gait than he'd entered. I watched him leave without feeling triumphant or sentimental. It felt like running into someone I once worked with at a job I'd long since left. Familiar, but irrelevant to my present life. There was no anger, no sting, no ache, just the calm acknowledgement of a past chapter finally settling into place. When I stepped outside with my coffee, Evan was sitting in the car, waiting for me, scrolling through his phone. He looked up immediately when he saw my expression. That him, he asked. Yeah, I said, sliding into the passenger seat. You okay? I'm good, I said, and realized I truly meant it. It's done. Really done. He reached over and squeezed my hand. Good. Let's go home. The word home didn't echo with uncertainty anymore. It felt solid, warm, lived in. Our apartment wasn't perfect. Laundry piled up, dishes sometimes sat too long. We occasionally disagreed about whose turn it was to take the dog out, but it was ours. And it was peaceful. Weeks after that encounter, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened, not in a nostalgic way, but in a way that allowed me to draw clean lines under the lessons learned. I realized something important breaks are often breakups in disguise. Tests aren't ways to measure love. They're ways to control someone without admitting what you're doing. Respecting someone's stated boundaries isn't cruelty, it's honesty. And most importantly, moving on isn't betrayal, it's self-preservation. He wanted me to fight for him by ignoring his words, by chasing him despite being told not to. He wanted control wrapped in vulnerability, a test wrapped in a plea. He wanted me to prove that I valued him more than myself. But I didn't fail his test. I passed my own. And the right man didn't ask me to pass anything. He didn't demand demonstrations of love. He didn't lace affection with conditions. He didn't make me prove myself. He simply chose me consistently with clarity and honesty, the way healthy people do. He wasn't a test, he was the answer. And for the first time in a long time, I felt certain that I was too. My name is Natalie Blaine, and I'm 31 years old. For the past 2 years, I thought I was in a committed, steady, almost fated relationship with my 28-year-old boyfriend. We didn't live together, but we were serious enough that I'd begun imagining shared leases, maybe even a future proposal, something quiet and beautiful. But that version of my life began to unravel 6 weeks ago. It started slowly in ways that were almost too subtle to trust. My boyfriend had always been relaxed about his phone, left it on the couch, tossed it on the counter, handed it to me while we watched TikToks. Then one day I noticed something, a text came in. He glanced at it, and without a word, he angled the screen away from me. Not dramatically. Not enough to draw attention, just a small shift. But small shifts are often the first signs of something bigger. Then the passwords changed. His phone, his laptop, even his smartwatch now required codes he refused to share. He'd say things like, I love you, but I need some privacy. It's healthy. Except it wasn't healthy because he'd never needed that privacy before. When he stepped out onto the balcony to answer a call one evening, closing the sliding door behind him, like an airtight seal, I felt something tighten in my chest. It wasn't one specific moment, it was the accumulation. Late night messages he wouldn't let me see, calls he took in another room, sudden excuses, strange defensiveness, emotional acrobatics. Whenever I voiced concern gently, he flipped it back onto me with such practiced ease it made my stomach twist. Natalie, you're being insecure. Why would you assume the worst about me? This is exactly why I didn't want to bring it up your reactions. Each sentence threaded a quiet gaslight through my ribs. I knew the signs. Everyone does, even if they pretend they don't. But love is a powerful sedative. It makes you slow to react hopeful for too long patient beyond reason. And I was patient, even when things escalated 3 weeks ago. He started having more client dinners. Not unusual, he worked in pharmaceutical sales, and client dinners were part of the job. But when those dinners began happening 3 or 4 times a week, always followed by him coming home late, hairstyled, freshly wearing his most expensive cologne, something inside me stirred. A whisper, a warning. I tried to keep things light, approaching it more as teasing than accusation. Wow, you've been networking like a CEO lately. He froze, as if the air around him solidified. Are you serious right now, Natalie? I'm working. This is my career. Why are you making me feel guilty for doing my job? That was the moment I learned he was going to weaponize the word trust. Every time I questioned anything gently, neutrally, even lovingly, he twisted it into an indictment of my character. 2 weeks later, it escalated again. He told me he had a business trip coming up. 3 days. Major clients. A pharmaceutical conference. Routine enough. But when I asked where he was vague, his tone too airy to be natural. Oh, just some convention center thing. You know, hotel boring panels. The usual. Which hotel, I asked. I want to send you something. Just a little good luck surprise. He hesitated. Just a fraction, but hesitation always matters. I'll text you the details later, babe. I'm running late. He never texted them. By then, the whisper in my chest had become a steady, insistent pulse. Then came Tuesday. The text that changed everything. It was 2:10 p.m., and I was at work reviewing quarterly reports when my phone buzzed. Pop quiz. Do you trust me? I stared at the screen confused. Random question, LOL, what's up? Just answer, yes or no. Do you trust me? Completely. I didn't breathe for a moment. Innocent people don't test their partners out of nowhere. Guilty people gauge suspicion. This wasn't a test of trust. It was a test of whether he'd successfully hidden something. My reply was steady completely, and it was the first outright lie I'd told him in months. His response came instantly. Good. Just making sure. Sometimes I feel like you doubt me when I talk about work stuff. Wanted to hear you say it. Then he followed up business trip this weekend, BTW. Leaving Friday morning, back Sunday night. There it was. His alibi, crafted carefully, confirmed by the trust he believed he still had. I stared at that message for a long time. The hum of my office felt dim, muffled, like I'd stepped inside a bubble where reality paused. My hands trembled slightly, not from heartbreak, but from clarity. If someone needs to test your trust, it's because they know they're about to break it. During my lunch break, I Googled private investigators. That afternoon, I met with Detective D, a woman in her 50s, with the posture of someone who had seen much darker things than infidelity. Her eyes were sharp, assessing, grounded. I get cases like yours all the time, she said as she scanned my boyfriend's photo. Partner acting strange, secretive, sudden business trip. You're smart to follow your instincts. I slid my phone across the table, the messages open. I need to know what he's actually doing this weekend. And I need proof. Photo and video documentation, she said. GPS tracking if he's sloppy. I'll get you answers. But you need to be prepared for what I might find. I swallowed, quietly, firmly. At this point, not knowing is worse. She nodded once. Surveillance starts Friday morning. Those next 2 days felt like torture wrapped in pretense. I acted normal around him. I smiled, I laughed, I touched his arm, cooked him dinner, kissed him goodnight. He seemed lighter, oddly affectionate, like someone who was comforting his conscience before doing what he already planned. On Thursday night, he hugged me long at the door. Miss you already, baby. You'll do great, I whispered. Safe travels. But in my chest, something cold and sharp had taken root. Friday morning at 8:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. Target departed residence at 8:15. I'm following. At 8:30, my boyfriend texted me at the airport. Wish me luck. At 9:03, Detective D sent the update that punched the air out of my lungs. He's not at any airport. He just checked into the Riverside Hotel downtown. Uploading photos now. And that was the moment I knew. The person I'd loved for 2 years was a stranger, and the truth was only just beginning. Friday afternoon felt strangely silent, as if the world had turned down its volume just enough for me to hear my own pulse. Detective D continued sending me updates, each one a fresh cut, small, precise, undeniable. At 11:23 a.m., she wrote Target left hotel in cocktail attire, following to upscale restaurant. A second later, I received a photo through the encrypted portal. There he was, my boyfriend, dressed impeccably, smiling in a way he hadn't smiled at me in months. Standing beside him was a woman in her mid-40s, elegant, confident, the kind of woman who looked like she closed deals before breakfast. Then another photo, the two of them greeting each other with an intimacy that cannot be mistaken. Her hand lingered too warmly on his shoulder. His fingers brushed her waist as though guided by memory, not courtesy. My phone buzzed again. 12:07 p.m. Target and female companion seated, holding hands across table, uploading photos. I opened them, and for the first time in days, I didn't feel my chest tighten. I felt it go numb. It wasn't simply cheating. It wasn't even secrecy. It was ease, familiarity. He wasn't anxious or guilty or conflicted. He was comfortable. At 1:45 p.m., another update came, returning to hotel. Same room as earlier. Confirmed. 10 minutes later, he texted me, conference sessions are so boring. Miss you already, Nat. I stared at the message, my expression so still that if someone walked past my desk, they might have thought I'd frozen in place. There is a particular kind of betrayal that doesn't feel like fire, it feels like ice. Slow, heavy, crushing from the inside out. The updates slowed for a while. At around 3:30 p.m., Detective D confirmed they were still in the room. I didn't want to imagine what that meant. I didn't need to. At 6:17 p.m., male companion departed. Target still in room. At 7:00 p.m., Target left hotel, new outfit, following. I wondered what he would lie about tonight. Maybe another client dinner. Maybe meeting with colleagues. Cheaters always recycle the same scripts, assuming no one's paying attention. By 8:04 p.m., the next message arrived, new woman, younger, approx 30-35. Very affectionate greeting. Uploading photos. Younger, affectionate, another woman entirely. I blinked once, twice, then leaned back in my chair. Something inside me shifted, not broken, not unraveling, but hardening. When I opened the photos and saw him embracing the second woman, holding her hands with the same tenderness he'd once used with me, laughing with the same softness. That was the moment my heart detached. It wasn't sadness, it wasn't anger, it was clarity. He wasn't in a crisis or confused or tempted. He was running a well-oiled system. At 8:30 p.m., he texted me again. Networking dinner with farmer reps. We'll call you later. He didn't call. Of course he didn't. At 10:45 p.m., Detective D updated me with clinical precision target and second female companion entered hotel together. New room. Same hotel, confirming both rooms. I no longer felt shocked. I felt strangely calm, like I'd stepped out of my own life and was simply observing it through thick glass. Saturday was a repetition almost to eerie perfection. Breakfast with the older woman. Afternoon shopping with the younger one. Late dinner with the older again. Private rooms. Patterned affection. Duplicated gestures. A rotating script of intimacy. It was choreography. Practiced, rehearsed, deliberate. Detective D's report delivered. Sunday morning was comprehensive enough to make even the dullest lawyer take notice. It detailed every movement, time-stamped every interaction, and captured the depth of both relationships with chilling objectivity. I read the report in full piece by piece. The older woman, successful, refined, generous, paid for everything. Meals, shopping bags, even the hotel suite. She called him baby multiple times in audio clips. The younger one, warm, cheerful, seemingly a hopeless romantic, gave him jewelry at dinner and paid for her own hotel room. He used the same tone of affection with them that he used with me. The same playful touches. The same let's get a few candid smiles for photos. The same looks that once made me believe I was special. By the time I finished the report, I realized something crucial. He wasn't slipping into dishonesty. He was living in it. This wasn't impulsive cheating. It was a system, a cycle, a lifestyle. One he'd perfected long before me. I spent the rest of Sunday sitting in my living room. The afternoon light filtered through the blinds in pale gold stripes. A mug of untouched tea cooled next to me. And in that stillness, as the weight of the truth settled into my bones, I understood that I didn't want to confront him privately. There was no conversation that would fix this. No explanation that would soften it. No apology that would matter. Because betrayal is not just what someone does, it's who they choose to be. And he had chosen this life long before he ever chose me. Around 5:00 p.m., as if to finalize his own downfall, he texted, "Flight landing soon. Can't wait to see you. Missed you so much." But GPS data still placed him at the hotel. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop, created a new email, typed his parents' address, and wrote a subject line that would shatter their image of their son. "About your son's business trip." Then, for the first time that weekend, I exhaled not from relief, but from resolve. I hovered over the send button for 10 long seconds before clicking. The photos, the videos, the timestamps, the PI report, they all went straight to his parents' inbox. And once it was done, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: silence. Real silence. The kind that settles into your lungs like clean, heavy air. It lasted only 30 seconds. My phone rang. It was his father. His voice didn't sound like the warm, gentle man I'd shared holiday dinners with. It was ragged, uneven, already breaking. "Natalie, is this real?" Behind him, I heard his mother's voice rise sharply, then dissolve into sobs. "Yes," I said. "Every photo is timestamped. I hired a licensed investigator. I'm sorry." There was a long, empty pause. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled. "We'll handle this. Thank you for telling us." Then he hung up. My phone vibrated again, but this time it wasn't them. It was him. 6:30 p.m. Home. Coming over. I didn't respond. 7. Nat. Why aren't you answering 7:15? Please pick up. 7:30. This isn't funny. What's going on, Aita? Did I do something? Please talk to me. I watched the messages come in with an unsettling calmness. The kind of calm that happens only when something inside you has already snapped and fallen away. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was simply done. At 9:00, he must have gotten the call from his father. My phone lit up with call after call, 23 of them, in 15 minutes, all from unknown numbers. Then came the texts, frantic and panicked. "What did you send them? Why would you do that? You had me followed." "Call me now. This is insane." I blocked him. And that night I slept, deeply, peacefully, for the first time in 6 weeks. The next morning, the chaos arrived, in new form. At 7:30 a.m., someone knocked aggressively at my door. When I opened it, his best friend stood there, hair pulled back, holding a coffee as if it were both a shield and a weapon. "We need to talk," she announced, already pushing past me. I still hadn't even brushed my hair. "Good morning to you, too." She spun on me with fire in her eyes. "Do you even understand what you've done? I'm sure you're about to tell me." "His parents kicked him out," she snapped. "He's staying on my couch. He's a mess. He hasn't stopped crying." I took a slow sip of my actual coffee. "He's a mess. He spent the weekend juggling 2 women in hotel rooms. They weren't like that," she stammered. "Really, because the photos show otherwise." "You don't understand, Natalie." She lifted her chin defensively. "Those women, they were helping him. Helping him with what I asked, though. I already knew the answer. With money." I blinked. "So let me get this straight. Your argument is that he wasn't cheating. He was fundraising." She flushed. "He loved you. This was just, it got complicated." "Explain how making out with 2 women in separate hotel rooms is complicated." "Go on. I'm listening." She tried again. "He was trying to start a wellness coaching business. He told me everything." "He works in pharmaceutical sales," I said evenly. "He doesn't have a business." "He was afraid to tell you because you'd judge him." I stared at her for a long moment. Nothing says business venture like kissing investors. "You're twisting everything," she said, voice rising. "You ruined his life." "No," I corrected her. "I revealed it." She glared at me. "He wants his stuff." "It's by the door," I said, pointing to a small box I'd packed the night before: his toothbrush, a hoodie, a charger, and some grooming products he'd left behind. "That's everything." That's all she demanded. "We didn't live together," I reminded her. "He didn't leave much here. Mostly just lies." She snatched the box like it offended her hands. "You're a cold person." "I'm someone who trusted evidence instead of excuses," I replied. "If that makes me cold, I'm fine with it." She slammed the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Later that morning, while I was at work, his email slid into my inbox, a long, rambling essay of blame, guilt, self-pity, and emotional manipulation. "I know you're angry. I know I messed up. But sending those photos to my parents, that was cruel. They're not speaking to me. My dad called me a failure. My mom won't stop crying. My whole family knows now. And for what?" Because I was trying to secure funding for our future, those women meant nothing. You were the one I loved. If you had been patient, if you had talked to me first, we could have fixed this. I typed one sentence in return. Pop quiz. Do you trust me when I say I don't care completely? Then I blocked that email too. The following afternoon, his mother called from a blocked number. At first, I didn't answer, assuming it was him, but something made me pick up. Her voice came through soft, strained trembling. Sweetheart. My heart twisted. Yes, ma'am. I just wanted to apologize, she whispered. I raised him better than this. I truly thought he'd changed. She inhaled shakily. We loved you, Natalie. We thought you two would last. And now we find out he's been lying to everyone, even to us. I closed my eyes. You don't owe me an apology. I do, she insisted. You deserved honesty, and he gave you nothing but deceit. A long silence followed. When she spoke again, it was barely audible. He hurt all of us. After we hung up, the heaviness in my chest wasn't heartbreak anymore. It was empathy. For her, for his family, for every person he had manipulated. By Wednesday, a letter arrived from a lawyer accusing me of violating his privacy and demanding $15,000. I forwarded it to my attorney friend, who called me laughing. This is garbage, he said. A bluff. You're fine. If he tries to file anything, we'll make him regret it. I believed him. On Thursday, the fallout widened. A text appeared on my phone from a number I didn't recognize. It was the older woman, the elegant one. He told me you two broke up months ago. He said you were stalking him and trying to destroy his business. If either of you contacts me again, I'll involve the police. I forwarded her message to Detective D, who contacted the woman directly. Less than an hour later, the woman texted again, this time shaken, almost panicked. I need the PI report, please. I sent her everything relevant. She called me immediately afterward, voice brittle. I gave him $30,000, she whispered. For a business plan he stole off a wellness website. Her breathing hitched. I thought he loved me. I had no words, because suddenly, painfully, it became clear. This wasn't just infidelity. This was a pattern, a strategy, a long-running con, and it had only just begun to collapse. The days that followed felt strangely weightless, as if I were walking through the aftermath of a storm that had uprooted everything except me. I wasn't shattered or spiraling. I wasn't replaying memories or questioning my worth. Instead, I felt a steady, measured detachment, like someone who had finally stepped out of a burning building and was watching the flames from the sidewalk. By the start of the second week, the consequences he'd spent years outrunning caught up with him all at once. The elegant older woman, the one who had been funding him without realizing she was being used, filed a civil suit. Not a threat, not a warning. A real formal fraud case. She had forwarded the PI documentation to her lawyer, who easily discovered that the business plan he'd pitched wasn't just poorly constructed, it was plagiarized verbatim from a legitimate wellness coaching website. He hadn't even bothered to change the formatting. He just pasted his name on top and rehearsed a script charming enough to convince her. The younger woman, the affectionate one, reacted differently. She blocked him everywhere, disappeared completely, and according to Detective D, refused to discuss him at all. She didn't want explanations. She didn't want justice. She wanted distance. I couldn't blame her. His situation at home deteriorated just as quickly. His parents, stunned by what they'd uncovered, dug deeper into his personal finances. They found secret credit cards, thousands of dollars in transactions with women they'd never heard of, unexplained cash deposits and loan requests disguised as business expenses. They found dating app receipts. They found messages. They found everything he'd assumed he had hidden. His mother called me again just once more, her voice gentler this time. He's been lying to us for years, she said softly. We didn't see it. We didn't want to see it. We thought love could fix everything, but he doesn't just make mistakes. He manipulates. There was sadness in her words, but also resignation, and something else, relief. For the first time, she saw the truth. He lost his job soon after. Officially, it was performance concerns, but everyone knew the truth. Pharmaceutical sales didn't want a liability, and the lawsuit alone was enough to make him a risk. Word travels fast in industries that depend on trust. His friends began disappearing one by one. People don't stay loyal when the lies begin touching their lives too. A few of them sent me quiet, apologetic messages, just variations of, I didn't know, and I'm sorry I doubted you. I didn't respond. Some bridges aren't worth repairing. His parents made their final move at the end of that second week. They asked him to leave the state. Not temporarily, not as a break, as a necessity. Fresh start, they called it, but we all knew it was exile. His father arranged for him to stay with an aunt nearly 2,000 miles away, far from the lawsuit, far from the women, far from the mess, and far from me. In the middle of all this collapse, he made one last attempt to rewrite the narrative. Not through texts, those were blocked. Not through calls, security stopped those at the building door. Instead, he sent me a physical letter. 6 handwritten pages. I stood at my kitchen counter, the envelope still warm from the sun, before deciding to read it. Not because I wanted closure, I already had that. But because people who manipulate usually reveal the most when they think they're being vulnerable. The letter began with apologies. Flowery, overwritten apologies that sounded like a bad script from a drama series. I never meant to hurt you. Everything spiraled beyond my control. I only wanted to build a future for us. Then came excuses. Those women were helping me. I only acted affectionate because they expected it for the money. I felt trapped. I couldn't tell you because you'd judge me. Then came the twist I'd been expecting the blame. You don't understand the pressure you put on me. You always wanted me to dress nice, look good, go to fancy places. I did all of this because of the lifestyle you expected me to maintain. I stared at the page in disbelief. He was rewriting the script entirely. According to him, he hadn't scammed multiple women. He'd simply been a victim of my expectations. The next paragraph made it worse. If you had been more understanding of my financial struggles, I wouldn't have needed to seek help elsewhere. I set the letter down, stunned not by the words, but by their predictability. His refusal to take responsibility was so complete, so absolute, it bordered on performance art. He wrote about pursuing legal action. His lawyer had already dropped him. He wrote about how everyone believed he was the victim. They didn't. He wrote that he loved me more than anyone ever had. Untrue, obviously. And finally he ended with, "Someday you'll realize what you lost." I took a photo of the letter and sent it to his best friend, the one who had initially defended him until the truth became unavoidable. She replied within seconds, still playing the victim. "I see. Keep that letter. If he pulls anything else, it's evidence." I filed it away not because I needed it, but because it felt symbolic, like storing the last tangible piece of a story that no longer belonged to my life. By the end of week 3, everything had settled into place. His family had helped him pack. The lawsuit was moving forward. His job was gone. His apartment was being sublet. And he had finally stopped trying to reach me, not out of acceptance, but because he had no more access left to try. I looked around my quiet apartment that Sunday evening and realized the air felt different, lighter, cleaner, almost warm. I didn't miss him. I didn't mourn the loss of the relationship. I didn't feel broken. I felt free. The collapse of his world had been loud, messy, far-reaching, but my own world, mine, had never felt more intact. 3 weeks after I sent the photos to his parents, the dust finally settled. Not neatly. Nothing about this story had neat edges, but in a way that made everything clear. The consequences he'd been outrunning for years had finally gathered and closed in around him piece by piece until the life he'd constructed from charm and manipulation collapsed into something small and quiet and far away from mine. His family followed through on what they'd told me. They put him on a plane to live with his aunt across the country. I heard from his mother indirectly through a mutual acquaintance that he'd been told not to come back until he sorted himself out. It wasn't punishment. It was containment. They couldn't continue cleaning up after him. They couldn't keep enabling the version of him they'd tried so hard to believe existed. They loved him, but love without boundaries turns into something dangerous. The lawsuit from the older woman moved forward faster than I expected. She had a strong case, documented lies, financial deception, a plagiarized business plan, and a cavalier pattern of misrepresentation. Her attorney subpoenaed the PI's full report. I complied. It felt surreal forwarding evidence of a life I once believed in, now reduced to exhibits in a fraud claim. The pharmaceutical company he'd worked for officially terminated him. Performance issues, they said publicly. Privately, they didn't want the liability. No corporation wants to be associated with someone who treats networking like a romantic Ponzi scheme. His friends stepped back, some out of discomfort, some out of embarrassment, some because they finally realized they'd been lied to as well. The few who reached out to me did so quietly, apologetically, almost cautiously. But I didn't answer. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need their sympathy. I didn't need anything from people who watched the signs and said nothing. As for me, my life became strangely peaceful. No more checking my phone with dread. No more overthinking every late-night text or odd comment. No more negotiating with myself about whether I was imagining things. No more hollow reassurances that felt like they evaporated the moment he spoke them. I found myself cooking dinner with music on dancing barefoot in my kitchen, without distraction. I caught up on projects I'd been too exhausted to start. I took long walks without rehearsing conversations in my head. I slept through the night. I laughed more easily. The absence of chaos felt like a gift I didn't even know I'd been missing. Sometimes people ask whether I regret sending the photos to his parents. They say I could have confronted him privately, spared his family the embarrassment, minimized the fallout. But regret, no. What I did wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. His parents deserved to know their son wasn't who he pretended to be. They deserved to know the man they were emotionally and sometimes financially supporting was living a double life that hurt everyone who crossed his path. And honestly, if I hadn't sent the proof, he would have rewritten the story before I could blink. He was always good at rewriting stories. The irony is that he never apologized in any real way. Not once. Not sincerely. Not without a but waiting at the end of every sentence. His messages were filled with accusations, manipulations, excuses, and creative blame shifting. He apologized only for the consequences, not for the choices. And a person who won't take responsibility for the harm they caused will cause it again. Not maybe, not possibly, always. That's why I didn't respond. That's why I didn't look back. The final attempt he made to contact me wasn't through a letter or a call. It was silence. A void where there used to be noise. He didn't text me on my birthday last week. For the past 2 years, even when he was lying, scheming, juggling, and betraying, he never missed it. But this year, there was nothing. Strangely, it was the best birthday gift he could have given me. Because that silence meant something I had been hoping for without saying aloud. He no longer had access to me. Not to my time, not to my emotions, not to my hopes, not to any version of my life he once felt entitled to shape. The truth is, I didn't lose anything when I lost him. He lost someone who loved honestly. He lost someone who trusted deeply. He lost someone who believed in him even when she shouldn't have. He lost the one person who might have helped him face the parts of himself he always ran from. I simply gained clarity. I gained my peace, I gained my freedom, I gained myself back. And now when people ask if I'm scared to trust again, I tell them this: I'm not afraid of trust. I'm afraid of ignoring my instincts. Trust is earned through consistent behavior, not demanded with a text message disguised as a pop quiz. Trust is shown, not claimed. Trust requires honesty, not choreography. He taught me that, or rather losing him did. So now when I look at the last 3 months of my life, the lies, the unraveling, the confrontation, the fallout, I ask myself one last question. Pop quiz. Am I better off? Completely. I'm Alicia Drury, 27 years old, and for a long time I believed I understood what embarrassment felt like. I thought it was the kind of mild sting you get when you trip in public or mispronounce someone's name. But that belief shattered the night my boyfriend Callum turned an engagement party into a spotlight for his own chaos and dragged me into the center of it. Callum was 25, charming, magnetic, and beautiful in that curated, social media-friendly way. 11,000 followers adored his lifestyle content, sunlit coffee photos, gym selfies, angled for maximum jawline outfits. He captioned with inspirational quotes. He knew exactly how to gather attention. I just never realized how much he depended on it. We'd been together 2 years when the party happened, an outdoor venue strung with fairy lights that blurred softly against the dusk. About 80 people milled around, enjoying the evening. For a while, it felt perfect: light music, small laughter, that hopeful buzz engagement parties always have. I was talking to the groom's sister about her new job when Callum suddenly appeared beside me. 3 drinks deep, I could smell the citrus vodka as he leaned in far too close. "There you are," he said, voice sharp enough to slice the moment in half. "Of course you're talking about boring stuff." I introduced him, trying to smooth over his tone, but Callum rolled his eyes like I'd dragged him into something offensive. Then, without warning, "We need to leave, now." I blinked. "Callum, we got here an hour ago." "I don't care. Derek's here." Derek, his ex-best friend. The one he'd accused of stealing a brand partnership 6 months ago. Ever since they'd been firing not-so-subtle subtweets at each other, like 2 people arguing from opposite rooftops. I'd hoped they'd avoid one another tonight. So I tried reason, then just avoid him. That was the spark. Callum's voice detonated loud enough for conversations around us to falter. You never support me. You don't understand what he did to me. You're supposed to be on my side. People stopped talking. The music kept playing, but the dance floor froze. I felt dozens of eyes shift toward us as Callum's gestures grew more dramatic, his voice rising with each accusation. You think I'm being dramatic. You think I'm crazy. Callum, please. Don't. Callum, please me. I'm done explaining myself to people who don't get it. Then he threw his drink, not directly at me, but onto the ground. The splash arced upward, spraying across the bride-to-be's dress like a cruel brushstroke. Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. I apologized. Immediately. Mortified, guiding him toward the exit while he swung between sobbing apologies and blaming me for making him look psycho. The drive home felt like hours. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed. Callum had tweeted, "If she can't handle me at my worst, she doesn't deserve me at my best." 47 retweets, nearly 900 likes. Comments like, "Period. Men always want us to shrink ourselves. Normalize not dimming your light for insecure partners." People who had no idea what had actually happened were cheering him on. I stared at the tweet for a long time. My embarrassment simmered into something steadier, heavier. Exhaustion. A strange clarity. Then I retweeted it with 2 simple words. "You're right." And I blocked him. Everywhere: Twitter, Instagram, phone, email. A full digital door slam. The calls started immediately. Unknown numbers, his friends, his sister, even one of his brand contacts. I turned my phone off and went to sleep with a strange, quiet finality humming in my chest. The next morning, I walked into my office lobby, and there he was, perfectly styled. Hair designer, bag, composed. Expression. No trace of the chaos from the night before. "We need to talk about what you did," he snapped. "Callum, please leave. You humiliated me. Do you know how many people saw that contacts from my partnerships are asking questions? Your brand contacts." "Yes." The agency called and 3 of my collaborators DM'd, asking if we broke up. "You're affecting my income, Alicia." I looked at him, really looked. That polished version of Callum he reserved for the camera had returned like nothing had happened. But I remembered the screaming, the drink, the dress, the silence afterward. "You screamed at me in public," I said. "You ruined someone's engagement party, but I'm the problem." "That was different. That was private. There were 80 people there. They're not my audience. My followers are, and you made me look crazy to them." "I agreed with you, Callum. You said I don't deserve you at your best." I agreed. His face twisted through confusion, anger, realization, and then a deeper anger. "Take it down." "No. Take it down or I'll—" "You'll what?" He froze. For the first time in 2 years, Callum had nothing to say. Security escorted him out eventually. But I had no idea that moment wasn't the end. It was the quiet breath before the real storm arrived. I thought blocking Callum would end things. I thought silence would finally give me space to breathe. Instead, it only handed him a stage, and he performed like the whole world was his audience. It started 1 week after the retweet. Callum resurrected himself online with a 15-tweet thread, accusing me of emotional manipulation, narcissistic abuse, and something he dramatically labeled digital domestic violence. He claimed blocking him had isolated him from his support system as if the people cheering him on were a medical team, and I had unplugged the life support. He even used those exact words, digital domestic violence. The internet ate it up. My retweet jumped from 50 likes to 8,000 in a day. Not because of anything I did, but because people from the engagement party guests who had seen the chaos firsthand started quote tweeting things like, "Is this about what I think it's about? Wait, didn't he throw a drink?" Here we go again. Old videos surfaced shaky phone clips of Callum's previous meltdowns. A roommate from 2 years ago posted, "Oh, you have no idea," with a prayer hands emoji. Then the bride-to-be uploaded the dress cleaning bill, tagging him. Callum doubled down. He posted a teary TikTok claiming I had weaponized the internet against him. 6 hours, 100,000 views. Sobbing into the camera, insisting he was being mobbed by haters. And then everything got weird. First, my landlord called. Someone reported me for illegally running a business out of my apartment. Then my gym emailed me saying my membership was canceled per my request, which I hadn't made. 3 food delivery orders I didn't place arrived at my office. One driver angrily insisted, "Ma'am, you did order this." Another looked nervous and asked if I lived alone. That was when the cold realization hit me. Callum was inconveniencing me into submission. Small, relentless hits. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. But the thing about screens is that they always keep receipts. I began documenting everything, the false reports, the unwanted deliveries, screenshots of every account involved, not out of spite, but survival. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was Rachel Callum's mother. "Alicia, honey, what is going on?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Callum's locked himself in his apartment. He won't eat. He says you ruined his life." I closed my eyes. I liked Rachel. She was one of the few steady people in his orbit. I told her the truth, the screaming, the thrown drink, the harassment, the fear that this might escalate. A long pause. "Oh, well, that explains the credit card charges," she murmured. "What charges?" "Alicia, he's been ordering things to random addresses. Food flowers, and good Lord, a mime." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Who orders a mime, Rachel?" "He's spiraling," she whispered. "Please don't ignore this. He needs help." "I know," I said softly. "I'll handle what I can." 2 days later, Callum's entire digital footprint went silent. No TikTok rants, no cryptic quotes, no threads, nothing. Radio silence. For a few hours, I actually believed it was over. But while Callum disappeared, Victor, his best friend and self-appointed social media soldier, did not. Victor ran a YouTube channel with 200,000 subscribers, mostly commentary videos. When his face appeared on my feed with the title, "My best friend's ex is stalking him, a deep dive," my stomach dropped. 45 minutes of selective screenshots, misdirection, sob stories, and dramatic music swells. He showed my retweet, but conveniently not Callum's original tweet. He talked about me blocking him, but not the engagement party meltdown. He spliced clips together in a way that made it look like Callum was the victim of some elaborate plot. The comment section was full of fire emojis and threats. "Someone like her shouldn't be allowed online. She's unwell. Protect Callum at all costs." But Victor made one critical mistake. In a montage meant to show how stressed Callum had been lately, he included a 2-second blurry clip from the engagement party. You couldn't see much, just a flash of motion, the sound of yelling, the faint arc of liquid flying through the air. He probably thought it was harmless. He had no idea it would become the thread that unraveled everything. That clip was about to shift the entire narrative in a way neither Callum nor Victor ever anticipated. And it was only the beginning. Victor's blurry 2-second clip should have been nothing. Just background chaos in a montage of Callum sighing into his ring light. But the internet has a way of sharpening shadows. By that evening, someone had enhanced the audio, someone else had slowed the frame rate, and within hours, a full video surfaced. Not from one angle, not from one guest, but a supercut stitched together from half a dozen different phones, each catching a different part of the blow-up at the engagement party. Callum screaming about Derek, me trying to calm him, his voice cracking with rage. The arc of the drink unmistakably intentional in its dramatic flourish. The bride's strangled gasp when her dress was soaked. My repeated apologies, my hand guiding him out as he shouted over me. There was no room for interpretation, no editing tricks, no ambiguity. The clip spread like wildfire. The phrase digital domestic violence, Callum's preferred dagger, trended again, but this time people were using it to mock him. Comments flooded in. So, this was the private meltdown. That poor bride. He threw a drink and called her abusive. I thought this guy was a minimalist, but apparently he's full of drama. Someone auto-tuned his scream. 2 million views on TikTok. Memes, parodies, duets. The internet did what it does best. It turned pain into entertainment. Victor panicked. He uploaded a follow-up video insisting the engagement party meltdown was taken out of context, that Callum was having a panic attack, and that I had failed to support him emotionally. It didn't work, because that was the moment Derek, formerly Deborah, now the ex-best friend Callum had accused of stealing a brand partnership, entered the battlefield. And Derek did not come empty-handed. He posted a thread with emails showing Callum trying to sabotage his opportunities, screenshots of Callum using fake accounts to leave negative reviews on Derek's content, a recorded phone call of Callum admitting he lied to brands about him, proof that the stolen partnership was actually offered to Derek after Callum showed up 2 hours late and drunk to the first photo shoot. Callum's online persona didn't just crack, it collapsed. His follower count plummeted from 11K to 6K in 48 hours. Brands quietly cut ties. A few not so quietly posted statements distancing themselves from him. Then Callum made what would become his most infamous mistake. He returned to Twitter with a Notes app apology. It started predictably. I've been doing a lot of reflecting. This isn't who I am. Mental health is so important. But he couldn't resist adding, while I take accountability for my actions, I'm disappointed my ex chose to publicly humiliate me instead of handling this privately. It was like he'd thrown gasoline onto already burning resentment. I had kept silent through everything. I hadn't responded to a single post. But this backhanded apology, masquerading as reflection, required an answer. So I wrote my own thread. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I didn't embellish. I simply laid out the facts of the past 2 years. The restaurant meltdowns, the barista he made cry, the shattered phone he threw at a wall because I didn't like his Instagram post fast enough, the nights he insisted I was unsupportive for not engaging with every piece of his content, the engagements he ruined, the apologies I'd made on his behalf, the isolation he created with his cycles of drama and silence. Each incident included dates, times, witnesses tagged, no commentary, just facts. And then the kicker, the security footage. My office building keeps records of everyone entering the lobby. Crystal clear video captured Callum demanding I delete the retweet, threatening me, and finally being escorted out by security. I ended with, I didn't humiliate you publicly, Callum. You did that yourself. I only agreed with you. That line spread faster than everything else combined. Within an hour, Rachel, his mother, called me in tears. Alicia, I'm so sorry. I didn't know it was this bad. We're getting him into therapy. Real therapy this time. Real therapy. Not the kind he'd quit after one session because the therapist didn't understand my brand. But the fallout didn't stop at apologies. The bride, still angry about her ruined engagement dress, filed a small claims lawsuit against Callum, won $200 for cleaning and emotional distress. When the court hearing came, Callum tried to countersue me for defamation. The judge watched the viral compilation for less than 5 minutes, then dismissed his claim with the driest voice imaginable. Mr. Callum, that video speaks for itself. He left the courtroom shaking. And I watched something I never expected, the beginning of Callum's unraveling. Not the dramatic, fiery kind he was used to performing, but the slow, quiet collapse of someone who'd built his life out of mirrors and was finally seeing a reflection he couldn't control. But the strange thing was, he wasn't done reinventing the narrative. Not even close. 3 months passed after the engagement party disaster, 2 months since the internet meltdown, 1 month since I'd heard anything directly from Callum. Most people would disappear after a public collapse, that dramatic go offline, regroup, maybe start therapy for real. But Callum did what Callum always did. He pivoted. When he resurfaced, it wasn't on Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok. He came back on OnlyFans, rebranded, not as a lifestyle influencer, but as a mental health warrior and survivor of public shaming. He posted thirst traps with captions like, finding strength in vulnerability, healing one day at a time, rise above the hate. And people paid for it. A lot of people. Turns out infamy converted better than his curated matcha flat lay content ever did. Alongside his reinvention, Victor doubled down too. He made video after video defending Callum, 20 minutes here, 40 minutes there, turning our breakup into a serialized saga about cancel culture, mob mentality, and the so-called cruelty of women who weaponize social media to destroy men. He called me calculating, manipulative, a master strategist of online shaming. In their story, I became a villain so meticulous I could have run an intelligence agency, a digital puppeteer pulling strings, a woman who engineered the entire meltdown by anticipating exactly how Callum would behave. According to Victor's analysis, I strategically chose the engagement party, knowing Callum would explode. I baited him by talking to the groom's sister. I waited for the right moment to retweet. I orchestrated the avalanche. Apparently, I was a genius playing 4D chess while working a normal 9 to 5 and trying not to cry into my instant noodles. Meanwhile, the actual truth was so simple it almost felt unremarkable. I was tired. Tired of the screaming. Tired of apologizing for him. Tired of being painted as the villain in a story I wasn't even trying to be in. My retweet wasn't revenge. It wasn't strategy. It was resignation. But the internet didn't want quiet truth. It wanted spectacle. And Victor and Callum gave it to them, producing their own dramatic universe where he was the fallen angel and I was the serpent. The irony was almost poetic. As the noise around them kept growing, my own life became quieter. I stayed off social media except for work. I went to therapy, a real therapist, not the kind Callum dismissed for failing to align with his brand. I took walks in the evenings, cooked more, read books that hadn't been touched in months. Normalcy felt strange at first, like silence after years of background static. But every few days, someone would send me a clip from Victor's newest video or a screenshot of Callum claiming he was healing from emotional abuse perpetrated by someone who should have loved him. It was bizarrely surreal watching a version of me that didn't exist being dissected by strangers who had never met me. It was like attending my own trial with evidence pulled from thin air and a jury comprised of usernames with anime profile pictures. Still, I didn't respond, not once, because the truth had already spoken for itself. Everyone who mattered had seen the meltdown, the receipts, the security footage. Nothing Victor crafted could erase what people had already witnessed. But then something happened that even I wasn't prepared for. Callum began telling a new story, one in which he wasn't just hurt, he was ruined by me. He claimed I had destroyed his chances at long-term success, that I'd maliciously dismantled his reputation, that my thread weaponized the collective wrath of the internet. He painted a world where he could have been a rising star if only I hadn't stood in the way. And the saddest part was that he seemed to believe it. He clung to the narrative the way someone clings to debris after a shipwreck. I saw in him something I hadn't recognized before. He didn't just want attention. He didn't just want sympathy. He wanted a villain so badly he would reshape reality to create one. And the more I stayed silent, the more powerful his imagination became. Meanwhile, my life kept inching forward, slowly, uneventfully, blessedly. But the story wasn't finished. Because fate, or the universe's dark sense of humor, had one last twist left. One message, from someone I never expected to hear from. A woman named Alexandra, Callum's ex before me. And everything I thought I knew was about to take on an entirely different shape. The message arrived on a random Wednesday afternoon. A simple, "Hi, Alicia. This might sound strange, but I wanted to thank you. Alexandra." I stared at her name for a long moment. Callum had talked about her constantly, always in the way people talk about shadows they swear they've outrun. According to him, Alexandra was toxic, emotionally cold, obsessed with controlling him, unsupportive, and jealous of his success. In his stories, she was the villain who didn't understand him. I never fully believed him, but I also never questioned him out loud. Not back then. When Alexandra asked to meet for coffee, curiosity defeated hesitation. She arrived wearing a soft gray coat, hair tied back, eyes calm in a way that suggested she'd walk through storms and learn to live with the rain. She wasn't at all the person Callum had described. In fact, she looked like someone who had learned to rebuild herself quietly with intention. When she spoke, her voice was steady. "I saw your thread," she said, "and the videos, and the fallout. I'm sorry you went through that." I expected anger about being dragged back into Callum's history, maybe discomfort. Instead, Alexandra simply looked relieved, as if someone had finally switched on the lights in a room she'd stumbled through for years. "He had me convinced I was the problem," she said softly. "I was in therapy twice a week thinking I was some sort of narcissist. But when I saw what he did to you, the patterns were exact. The meltdowns, the public scenes, the way he rewrote everything online, even the same accusations." I exhaled, not sharply, not dramatically, but with a long, deep release I hadn't realized my chest had been holding. It was surreal sitting across from someone who had lived the same nightmare years before I ever stepped into it. Our experiences lined up like parallel timelines, two versions of the same story told by the same unreliable narrator. We compared notes. He would say things like, "You don't support my dreams, right?" she asked. I nodded. Or, "You don't understand my vision." She laughed genuinely, almost with disbelief. He said that exact sentence to me. Exact wording. There was no vindictiveness in her expression. Just recognition, understanding, a shared exhaustion that hovered between us like smoke finally clearing. "You didn't destroy him," she said gently. "You just stopped protecting him from the consequences of his own behavior." Her words landed with a weight I wasn't prepared for. Because for months, despite everything he'd done, some quiet part of me still wondered if I had gone too far, if silence had somehow been cruel. It's ridiculous, but when someone has spent years twisting your reality, even the truth begins to feel sharp and dangerous in your hands. Alexandra squeezed my hand. "You helped me heal," she said. Seeing the truth laid out so clearly, it finally made me understand it wasn't me. We talked for nearly 2 hours, not about Callum, but about surviving him, about learning to trust again, about the strange, hollow ache that comes from untangling yourself from someone who loved the spotlight more than the relationship. When we finally stood to leave, she hugged me. A quiet, grateful embrace between two women who had both learned the hard way that being cast as the villain doesn't make you one. As weeks passed, life settled into something less dramatic. I kept going to therapy. I began dating slowly, carefully, with the understanding that trust now had to be earned gently, not demanded loudly. The retweet, "You're right," stayed online. Sometimes I thought about deleting it, letting the whole ordeal die quietly. But then I'd remember the bride's ruined dress, the barista who cried, Derek's sabotaged partnership, Alexandra's years of silent self-blame, every apology I had made to shield a grown man from the consequences of his choices. No, the tweet stayed. Not as revenge, not as a weapon, but as a small digital monument to the danger of believing your own hype and the power of finally stepping out of someone else's distorted story. Every so often, Rachel Callum's mother texted me. Updates about him, apologies layered with regret, hopes that I was doing well. And I was. Not amazing, not euphoric, not living some grand cinematic redemption arc. Just, well, turns out well is enough when you've spent years drowning in chaos. Then one day, the bride from the engagement party followed me on Instagram. She posted a photo of her wedding dress, pristine, shining. No champagne stains in sight, and tagged me with, "Thanks for the drama content. Made the wedding speeches unforgettable." I laughed. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel bitter or tired. Just real. And that was my ending. Not triumphant, not poetic, not tied with a moral bow. Just life messy, ongoing, imperfect, and finally quiet. A quiet that no one applauded, but one that felt like the first honest victory I'd ever had.